That was actually published. Thank you so much. So before I start, I want to say Yasha Koach to Boaz, Miriam, Gabi, Avi, and of course all of us who are here.
Jenny.
And Jenny. Jenny, okay. So, and anyone else I forgot to mention. So the foundation for my talk was laid so brilliantly right now, so it allows me to sort of skip over some of the things I was going to define. Yizkor books, of course, allow us to study so many different topics. We already heard yesterday about politics. Gabi has done work on exhumation, reburial. Monica and Gabareski has talked about Yizkor books in terms of accounts of Polish, Jewish who returned to Poland after the war. And there's so many other topics, talk about art and literature and all of that. But my topic today is not about the content of the books. Rather, I'm going to be talking about the books as artifacts. So it's more of an anthropological perspective with some book history and reader reception theory. So another perspective that we're bringing here today in this conference. So to start, the original readers and writers of Yizkor books understood that their volumes fulfilled an obligation to bear witness to the life and death of Eastern European Jewry. Published within the Landsmannschaften, and those are the books I'm mostly interested in, the volumes were written for and by members from a common ancestral hometown. They were written for each other and their descendants. Of course, naturally, in the 1940s, the books were only published, in paper form, hardcover books. They were also printed and published in small runs by subscription for the members of the Landsmannschaft. And a few extras were published for various libraries. But however, over the years, as interest in the volumes grew, the limited supply of copies became a problem. Solutions to that shortage emerged in the 1990s when the creation of the digital library of Yizkor books by the National Yiddish Book Center and the New York City Public Library, as well as the establishment of an online database of Yizkor books by jewishgen.org. Along with the electronic versions of the books, and I'm going to show you all these books, along with the electronic versions of the books from the digital collections, the National Yiddish Book Center and New York City Public Library, as well as Jewish Gen, also felt the need to offer on-demand print copies. So the use of digital technologies to create text and hypertext versions of the books raises many questions about form, structure, content, use, meaning, value, readership, language, and of course, the future of the volumes. And interestingly, the ongoing interest in print runs, to some extent, happy to say, counter to the trend towards the digital distribution of texts. That's just me, okay. So to explore the impact of the digital technologies on the genre, I picked one volume to use as my case example, and that's Shlomo Vaga's Horowitz, which was published in 1949 by the Buenos Aires by the Buenos Aires Central Verband von Polnischer Judentum in Argentina, under the authorship of the Częstochow Landsmannschaft in Argentina. So at present, there are four new media versions, and Anna's going to help me. There are four new media versions of the Horowitz Częstochow. There's Jewish Gen's HTML English translation, and it's an accompanying print version, as well as the New York City Public Library and the National Yiddish Book Center's PHP, it's an old version of PDF, scanned version of the original. So what I want to do is just show you the 5 books now. So this is, so you know what I'm talking about. We have real books here, and we have also online versions. So this is the original Horowitz Częstochow from 1949. It's in really terrible shape. It's falling apart. So if you want to handle it, please do so carefully. So that's the original one. Let me show you then the online Jewish Gen version, and then the online, and then the Jewish Gen print version. That's the orange one, please. Let me just show. So this is the Jewish Gen website I have up, and here, this is the Horowitz Chenstokhov, and so this is the link to the online version of the volume, and it has some links to all the chapters in the volume, and I'll go through this a little bit later. Then, as you can see, next to Horowitz Chenstokhov link, there's a little book symbol, and so this means that, the other one, the orange one, please. So this now is the print-on-demand version of the translation of the Jewish Gen digital version. So I want to pass this around as well, and I'll go into these more, but I just want to show you what I'm talking about here. In addition, the New York City Public Library and the National Book Center had a partnership, scanned, I think, most of the volumes in the New York City Public Library were scanned onto the public library's websites. And this was a huge project in terms of money and effort and coding and software, and it was just more than we could get into, but the technical aspects of these projects are just phenomenally interesting. But here again, so you have online this version of the exact, it's a facsimile, page by page, scanned version of every page in the original volume. In addition, there's a link up here where it says buy book. This takes you to the National Yiddish Book Center. Well, okay, it would, maybe not, okay, it would, but it does, it will, eventually. I don't know, whatever this, forget about that.
Excuse me, sorry.
It will. Say it again. It would. And there you have an order form where you fill out your request and you pay for the book online, and then 3 or 4 weeks later you get your copy, and that's the blue.
That's this book.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the blue version that's going around, and it's an exact copy of the text. We'll talk about the differences later. Anyway, so I want to show you something. You have the original book, you have 2 electronic versions, and the 2 print-on-demand versions. Now let's talk about what this means. So, rather than using the traditional measurement of faithfulness, I find the concepts of adaptation and appropriation more useful for examining the original Horowitz Chenstokhov and its new media versions. According to Julia Sanders, and simply stated, adaptation is a transposition process and practice that casts the work into another genre. By contrast, appropriation is a practice and process that shifts the original into a new cultural product. The adaptation and appropriation of Horowitz Chenstokhov as a result of these new technologies occur on at least 3 levels. 1, fragmentation, recombination, and augmentation. The first 2, fragmentation and recombinations, are concepts I took from the work of N. Catherine Hales, who does a lot of studies of digital humanities. The third concept, augmentation, I sort of saw something that she didn't quite fully develop in the first 2. So I'm going to talk to you about how the Jewish Gen versions and the New York City Public Library and National Yiddish Book Center versions affect, on these 3 levels, fragmentation, augmentation, and recombination, affect the Yizkor books. And then draw some conclusions about the future, of course. So, in terms of fragmentation, this is the Jewish Gen site. In terms of fragmentation, as I mentioned before, each entry on the table of contents, right, is a hyperlink to the particular individual chapters. So just look on one. And what you see here is the material in the chapters of the online version are actually uploaded as HTML files. And you could see they don't preserve the original layout, the page layout, or anything. And actually, and then these are the files which were used to create the print version, and the print version also doesn't maintain the original page layout. It uses this HTML page layout, so it's a little bit odd. Another major difference in terms of the fragmentation is that the online and print versions of Horowitz Chenstokhov from the Jewish Gen site are removed from the Polish Judentum series affiliation, and I'll talk more about that later. So they're kind of taken out of the historical context. But that's sort of the negative. But in terms of the augmentation, the Jewish Gen does really add quite a bit to the new readers. And so first of all, what you find in the translations is that there are actually inserted explanations and definitions of Jewish words and concepts which are not in the original because, of course, original readers wouldn't need that. Another thing that Jewish Gen does, and I'll just show you this, just Jewish Gen also links to Kahila information. So you have this link here at the bottom of this chapter, Chenstokhov, Poland, and someplace on the bottom, you have information about the Jewish cemeteries of Chenstokhov as one example of additional information from this Jewish Gen parallel site called Kahila Links. And so here again, you have more information about the town that's outside of the book itself. So it's a way of augmenting the information in the book, which, helps contemporary readers. When you go back to the list of Yizkor books on the Jewish Gen Yizkor book main page, you can click back on this link, and you're directed to the New York City Public Library website, as well as the Jewish Gen's Books in Print project. And this is something relatively new. Jewish Gen has decided that people perhaps still want copies of books, actual books, and so there's information here that also adds to, augments the original book. For example, one thing that's very useful, I thought, you have some alternate names of the town. So this is something that would be very interesting. Also, of course, there's the marketing. You can look for the book on Amazon. You can look for the book in various libraries, the distributors rather. And so all this adds to and augments the book. The third aspect is the recombination. And then the recombination really is that, this is where I'm going to say that you can order this book, and then you have all the new version in the print form, and the books are marketed in a way that were not necessary, of course, for the original readers. So, and now this book is, you can get this on Facebook, you can get it on Amazon, and so this is a new combination for the readers of this particular new readers. So that's sort of the one for example from the from the Jewish Gen. I want to go over with you just for a few minutes the fragmentation, augmentation, recombination from the other version. The New York City Public Library and National Book Center fragmentation really is, to me, one of the worst aspects of this digitalization project, because it was done in 1994 with old software. These versions, all you can look at is pages. You can't browse this book, which of course I think in some ways defeats one of the purposes of using software to browse data. So it's an old version of the software, so whatever they had in 1994 is what they have. So what you can do is you can go page by page. You could skip up to 10 pages. You can go up to 50 pages, and you can go to particular pages if you know what page you're looking for. So that's sort of one fragmentation. So you can't even scan through the whole book. Another problem is that you can't even read a single page because the framing of the screen, of course, affects your ability to read the page. So that's a problem with, so this book is really fragmented with respect to the software. But in terms of augmentation, this really does add quite a bit to the use of this book. You can print a single page if you wish, but more than that, the links up here to the Jewish library, this link to the Yizkor books information, okay, thank you, really adds quite a bit to your use. So you have information about Yizkor books provided by the librarians themselves, about the Holocaust books by the librarians. Some very good auxiliary information, then of course with all the books listed. And also links to the Jewish Gen website, so this is very good. The recombination here again then has to do with the fact that the Book Center has a dust jacket, that blue dust jacket, which gives credit to the Book Center and also gives credit to the New York City Public Library, kind of glossing over in some significant ways, I think, the Landsmannschaft. So that's sort of the idea. Now I want to go over with you quickly, so what does this mean in terms of adaptation and appropriation? And I'll have to read at this point. Okay. So the decisions made by the Jewish Gen staff to translate the volumes more closely serve the needs of the original readers and writers for the transmission of testimony to future readers and writers than do the decisions made by the New York City Public Library and New York City Book Center because of the translation, right? In addition to writing for each other, the first generation wanted to pass the information to their children. However, as time passed, it became clear that the Israeli descendants of Holocaust survivors could read the Hebrew sections, not necessarily Yiddish ones, and American descendants of Holocaust survivors could not necessarily read either. Recognizing that most current readers don't have the facility with languages, the coordinators of the Jewish Gen initiated their translation projects. Since without readers, the intergenerational transmission of the testimony is unfulfilled, the use of digital technology helps meet the goals of the survivors by making English versions available online. By contrast, the scanned versions supplied by the Book Center and the New York City Public Library make the volumes only available to those who can read the original languages. However, by assuming that most readers are uninterested in Yiddish publishing, for example, the Jewish Gen versions omit most of the historical context of the original volume. For example, Horowitz was published by Mark Turkov, one of Argentina's major publishers in the 1930s and 40s. He was very interested in works about Polish Jewry, and his series, Das Polsche Judentum, includes a number of Yizkor books. For example, the 1945 Sokolov Yizkor book was the 4th title in that series. The 1949 Horowitz was the 46th, and the 1951 Belchikov Yizkor book was the 80th. By comparison, Elie Wiesel's 1956 Und die Welt hat geschwiegen, the precursor to Night, was the 117th book in the series. The Jewish Gen version leaves out the original back matter of Horowitz, which in fact had ads for Polish Judentum series. By contrast, the scanned versions supplied by the Book Center and the New York City Public Library do preserve the entire version of the book, even if it's unread. Now, appropriation. With respect to appropriation, the ownership and framing decisions affect the new media versions. For instance, the participants of the Jewish Gen versions claim part ownership of Horowitz insofar as the front matter of the Jewish Gen translations contain a disclaimer which also acknowledges the project coordinator, gives thanks to the translator, and provides a link for additional donations. The participants of the New York City Public Library and Book Center projects also claim a degree of ownership in Horowitz, given that the dust jacket, as I mentioned, credits the Book Center and its donors and the Spielberg Project. Another example of appropriation is evident in the copyright information found in the print versions, which lists Jewish Gen and New York City Public Library and Book Center as copyright holders. Additionally, to the extent that Jewish Gen and the New York City Public Library and Book Center organizational information frames the books, the original versions are embedded in their new media versions, and that also kind of glosses over the original Landsmannschaft. And this framing influences the current readers who are maybe likely to attribute the works to the contemporary organizations and not the Landsmannschaft. So, in conclusion, given that we're talking about the future, I see 3 areas of direction for the books that will only continue. One has to do with the scope of the testimony, the second has to do with the domain of the testimony in the books, and the third has to do with the range of uses. With regard to scope, the original books were meant as monuments in print for the entire destroyed community. The books stand for the whole place, the whole community, and not for an individual sort of user. So that's, you know, an ongoing problem. The technology is also affecting domain in which the books are found. Originally, the books were used inside the Landsman shopping community. However, the new technologies, as we see, along with the group, sort of individual dichotomy and change, the books are moving from the private organizations to the public sphere, the internet, and to other libraries. And then finally, the technology is also expanding the range of the use of books. The books now are, in addition to, instead of being used for primarily communal functions, the books are now being used by individuals for professional functions, for genealogical functions, for bibliographical functions, by librarians. All this is, you know, affecting the future of the books. So then the last point is that overall, given that the Yizkor books are artifacts from the survivor community, the digital turn is affecting the volumes as I've outlined to you, along with our cultural heritage. So while we need to keep in mind the availability and accessibility, as been mentioned, can't be denied, they also have to be books with the caveat that has already been said. Thank you so much. Thank you.